it's time for the hot topic of the hour. A new Monmouth University poll finds former President Trump and Hunter Biden's trials have little impact on the 2024 race, showing that 57% of voters think that the criminal charges against Trump were politically motivated, and 48% say that the same about Hunter Biden's trial. Meanwhile, President Biden addressing his son Hunter's conviction for the first time publicly in Italy yesterday. Watch.
I'm extremely proud of my son Hunter. He has overcome an addiction. He's one of the brightest, most decent men I know, and I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision, and I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
Here's what former President Trump had to say to Fox's Aisha Hasni yesterday about what he would do if he were in President Biden's shoes. Watch this.
You're a father, though. You understand what it means to be a father. What would you do in that situation?
Well, I think it's a very serious thing. I understand that whole subject. I understand it pretty well because I've had it. People have it in their family. It's a very tough thing. It's a very tough situation for a father. It's a very tough situation for a brother or sister. And it goes on, and it's not stopping, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever it may be. It's a tough thing, and so it's a tough moment for their family. It's a tough moment for any family involved in that.
Michael Balboni, your reaction.
So there's a father talking about his opponent's son, and he appears incredibly human, and he is not taking any political shots at all. It's exactly the right tone that he should have. You know, Trump has always been a maverick in terms of the way he deals with the press, the public. But here, he's taking a step back, and he's becoming more human from this perspective because he understands the pain that's happened. That's exactly the right tone that he should be doing.
Yeah, no, that's great. You're right. It was good to see that side of him. The former president, spent time yesterday working the room to appeal to GOP leaders with a visit to D.C., meeting with both House and Senate Republicans. That was an effort to unite the party ahead of the election and try to get an agenda that all would agree on. Trump then gave a hint about his vice president pick. Watch.
Was your pick for VP in that room with you?
Probably, yeah. Probably. I don't want to go, but probably. I think we'll probably announce it during the convention, sometime during the convention. So, but there were some good people in there. We have some very good people.
Do you know who your VP is?
I have sort of a pretty good idea. Look, we have some really talented people.
The Republican National Convention, where Trump will likely announce his running mate, is set for July in Milwaukee. July 15th is when it kicks off. Meanwhile, Senator J.D. Vance reportedly on Trump's short list, leading the charge of Senate Republicans who say they will block President Biden's judicial nominees and U.S. attorney nominations to protest the radical lawfare against former President Trump. They are taking a stand, Michael, in the face of these two systems of justice. They say, you know what? We're going to put a hold on all of these nominations until after the election, given the lawfare that is underway here.
Well, what's fascinating is obviously historic. You have a nominee of the major political party now indicted, convicted, and yet it doesn't really affect the polls. People see this as politicization of the justice system, which is very dangerous, by the way, for this country to see that. And now you have this. The Senate saying, we're going to respond to this, and this will not stand. We're now going to block these nominees. So you have a couple of things. One is that the Republicans are really coalescing. They're coming together in this, which is what they have to do before the next election. And the other thing they're saying is, you know, we're going to take a very hard look at what the states are doing. And we're going to make sure that what you use, when you use these types of tools, that in fact it's done in the right way. This is really unprecedented, and it's setting up a lot of confrontations that a couple of years ago people think would never, ever happen.
Yeah. Well, J.D. Vance led the effort, and this is an important move. You know, they announced that this blockade, Cheryl, it's a blockade of Biden nominees. They need to do something to protest what we're talking about every day, and that is this lawfare, using the federal agencies, weaponizing them against your political opponent, Donald Trump.
You know, and really, on a bigger scale, what we saw yesterday with the former president making the rounds in Washington, meeting with Senate Republicans, meeting with House GOP members, meeting with business leaders at the Business Roundtable, what you saw is the campaign and the president seemingly ready, okay, we're going to move on, and we're going to focus on uniting the party. Everybody getting behind Donald Trump as the nominee for the convention. We'll find out who the vice president pick is going to be, as you heard from the man himself at the convention. But really, I thought what I found so fascinating about yesterday was that really even Romney, Mitt Romney showed up. You know, Mitch McConnell. I mean, there's been a lot of these people in the last couple of years that have been very critical of the former president, but that's all really seemingly been put to bed. And what you have now is a party that is ready to unite, because it's not just about the presidency, Maria. It's about the House. It's about the Senate. If they really want to make effective change, you've got to have all three branches of government under your control. And that is what the Republicans really are doing. And I know we'll talk about this later, but that Business Roundtable, we know some things about it. And that was certainly very interesting, because Jamie Dimon was in the room, and Jane Fraser and Brian Moynihan. So.
Yeah, absolutely. The major banks were there. We'll talk about that coming up. Vance, on this effort to blockade Biden's nominees. It's an effort alongside Senator Mike Lee, Bill Hagerty, Roger Marshall, Tommy Tuberville, and Eric Schmidt, trying to block those swift confirmations. We're just getting started this morning. We've got a lot coming up.